Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Empowered to Advocate podcast. This is Dana Marie, and I'm joined with Michelle as usual. And then we also have a special guest today. We have Michael Pereira, who I will introduce fully in a few seconds. But Michael, you can say a quick hello.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me, guys.
Awesome. And we're going to get to know a little bit about Michael and who he is and what he does in just a few minutes. But quickly, a little bit of background. Michael is the founder of the Autism Voyage and helps parents of special needs children navigate financial and life planning challenges. As a financial professional specializing in insurance planning and autism dad himself, Michael knows firsthand how critical it is to have a proactive plan in place. His mission is to bridge the gap between insurance strategies and real life challenges, empowering families to secure their future with confidence. No one understands the challenges, wins, and fears quite like another parent walking this path. And today he's here to share his journey and practical steps every family should consider. And with that, welcome to the Empowered to Advocate podcast. Welcome,
Thank you.
welcome, welcome. So let's just get started. So you, in your bio, we just shared with our listeners and in our initial conversation with you, you talked a little bit about being a parent, being an autism parent, like you said. And so I guess a little bit about sort of who you are, your family, a little bit about your background before we jump into more of what you do.
Of course. So I came from corporate. I traveled, I would say, for many years, 70 to 80% of the time. So my lifestyle was very, I lived on the plane. And based upon that lifestyle, I met my wife. We wanted to get to do the American dream. So we got married, we got a house, we got pregnant with our first child, Christian Omar. But around when he had 1 year old, that's where we started seeing some symptoms that we knew that needed to be addressed. But I would say, like any other first time parent, we're in denial. Plus, you're obviously listening to possible friends, family that can tell you, "Hey, don't worry, he doesn't have anything. Just don't worry, give it time." And obviously, between the denial and obviously who you're listening to, that could procrastinate early intervention. In our case, it did procrastinate, but he was still too young. 1 year old is still too young for that sort of a diagnosis, we thought. But we knew that there was symptoms there that needed to be addressed. So COVID came by, was able to stay here. A lot of the symptoms reduced. Don't know why. But when COVID released, that I started traveling again, that's where all the symptoms he had increased. Full force, head against the wall, tippy toeing, aligning stuff. He at one point he was nonverbal, started talking, that regressed again. It became to a point that we knew we needed to be addressed. We got it addressed. And then obviously after the denial phase, then comes the acceptance phase, right? Start accepting now that there's a new reality, that the American dream you thought you were going to create, obviously just you need to modify it. So long story short, started looking for other employers to see if I can do the same thing but travel less. And along that time, I started looking for also my financial advisor, planner, because I started asking a lot of dark questions to myself. And like, hey, what if I pass away? Who's going to take care of him? What if my wife and myself pass away? Who's going to be the guardian? My mom can, even though my mom's the best grandma out there, she cannot take care of him 100% physically, because it's too much energy, and physically she cannot. So started looking for my own planner, and I couldn't find anybody because everybody just want to sell me something or recruit me. So became very frustrated, and that's where I would say, along with other things that I tried, the blog came about. And it's a blog, it's a newsletter, and we believe in education first. So just whenever a parent's ready, after they go through the blog, it resonates with them from a parent to a parent standpoint. Whenever they do need to talk about their financial state, that's where we come in. Hopefully, it wasn't too long.
That's actually perfect. And leading into our first question, which is sort of, you talked a little bit about how you made that sort of initial jump. You realized that the job that you had, the career that you had, just wasn't conducive at that point to also being home and supporting your son. And then you started looking for some financial support and, mostly related to sort of his future and what the future would be financially for him. clearly you realized there was a gap, right? A lot of us come to this work because we feel like there is a gap, right? There's a gap that needs to be filled. So how did you get from there's a gap that needs to be filled to I'm going to blow up my job and my career and try something different and new and also learn all of these new skills and all of this new information and so on and so forth? That's a big decision to make.
It is, and even though I'm here with you guys and I sound like very convincing, very, I have everything settled, but it took me a long time. It took my wife and myself a long time from doing a lot of inner searching to understanding what's the right thing we should be doing. How can we support each other? From her side, she was a stay-at-home mom. She now is a RBT, trying to focus. Now she wants to enroll into becoming an occupational therapist. Me from my side, yeah. So we just said we need to take the jump. We need to take the risk because if I can, regardless if I wanted to build a business or not, I needed to leave that travel, the amount of traveling I was doing. If I wanted to be present, because it was just becoming a nightmare here at home. So I would say there's no like right answer for that. I think that the leap came from knowing that there was something that I wanted to focus on. If it was going to work or not, I don't know. But obviously, leaving everything in God's hands, we said, okay, let's see if we can do this and try to build a plan upon that. So the blog, I first created the blog, even though I was already in financial services. But I just said, you know what, let me see how we can do this. And that's where obviously left corporate. I started looking for new jobs in startups, but when you're in the startup field, you wear different hats. So I started working even more. So I just said, if I'm going to do this for another person or another founder, I should do it for myself. So for my family, that's where we just took the leap and started this. And we've evolved from the website being super simple to now being more complex or adding more value. But it's something that you evolve.
We want to come back to, we're going to put a pin in that because we want to come back to more specifically the blog and the website and sort of like what services you offer specifically. But one question we always ask people who are parents and caregivers, but also work in and around education, special education, and working with folks with disabilities is you mentioned way back when your son was little, 1 years old, you knew that you had to consider early intervention, you knew you had to consider services, all those things. How did you know? We always ask parents and caregivers, like, how did you know that? Was it a lot of Googling? Was it, in the media, you were talking to other parents? Was it just like neighbors and friends? Like, how did you know, okay, here are the signs to look for of a child with autism, and I know I need to take that information and I need to do X, Y, and Z? We're always curious to know how parents have access to this information.
So actually, that's one of the factors why the blog was created. Because what I'm going to say now, so by being in denial, we try not to talk to even family, friends in some cases. So what would happen, and I assume it happens to a lot of parents, that you're just searching, scrolling at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. And one of the things that I saw as well was that each article I was reading was 7 years old, 6 years old. There was nothing updated. And that even worried me more because I couldn't find some sort of, you know, way of looking, okay, if he's hitting his head against the wall, why? Is it just a reaction? Is it what's happening, right? If he's tippy toeing, it came to a point that in Google said, I searched and one article was saying, oh, that can be the nervous system, that maybe he trenches and or it could be a symptom of autism. And it came, I think that what drove me to think about that was not having a certain answer. Because I didn't want to go outside because I felt that I was going to receive judgment by family, friends, and or anybody. We just say, you know what, this is not giving us peace. And I think that, we need to think 5 steps ahead. And I know that whatever you can find early and attack it early, whatever, if it's a condition, illness, there's a lot of probability that it can be, if not fixed, at least improve around time. So I think it was more that sense of from a father standpoint, that gut feeling that we needed to follow, because my wife we were in the same boat. We started looking, and we couldn't find like a direct answer. Is that good? I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think that that's that gut feeling you talk about, like parents just knowing, right? And just having almost that sixth sense, that spidey sense that, I don't know. I'm not an expert in this parent thing, but I do know that something just feels like it needs to be explored to see, you know, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I would say not only symptoms, but he wasn't sleeping at all, only a couple hours a night. A lot of things that, we enter into denial, then acceptance. But within that denial, for me, in my sense, it hit my ego from a parent, because I wanted him to be a baseball player. So, you start hitting that part. Plus, at the same time, apart from the ego, you get into a sense of curiosity. I think that is something that for us triggered curiosity in everything, from foods, from activities, from his school, daycare. Just that sense of curiosity triggered, and we became more of a planner parent. Planning for the future. And even though he's very high functioning, but at that point, it was tough.
And I think that's a good segue into thinking about how you were thinking about future planning. And I think this is a place where so many of us, even non parents and parents who have children without unique learning needs, right, or without disabilities, it can feel kind of like you had said earlier, like dark or not necessarily always top of the priority list to be thinking about these like bigger what ifs. What if something does happen to me? What if I lose my job or I pass away? Who's going to take care of my family? When actually these are some of the questions we should all be thinking about and planning for. So if you want to talk a little bit about what some of that planning would look like, because some people don't even have an awareness of what they should eat. Like, where do I even start with this?
Yeah, of course. But I think that planning is, I would say, it applies to everything, because even for therapy, right? Like, I would go to a therapy session just to wait for him outside, and you would see that there's parents that think that their therapists are nannies, right? So what I think is just planning goes into everything. Like, for example, if you're having a child and there's BCBAs, there's speech, that's your A team, and you need to plan accordingly with those therapists and see, okay, what should I be doing at home, because true therapy begins at home. So I think that team planning mentality should be not only applied for therapy, but from a financial, from every section of life that's important. I think it should be applied. From a financial point of view, I focus more on three main areas. One is, let's say, income protection. I do comprehensive insurance planning. What that means is it's not transactional. It really, really deep dives into the family's current state and see what would be their objective state. So, for example, if we tackle three main areas, the first one is income protection strategy. So that it is, if Christian depends on me 100% of the time, and I get cancer, have a stroke or a car accident, and my income is interrupted, this type of policy or coverage would be able to either replace my income for a certain amount of time or provide me a lump sum. Then we have using life insurance to be able to fund the special needs trust. A lot of people use special needs trust to be able to fund. For example, they use real estate, brokerage accounts, savings to be able to fund it. For me as a father, that fluctuates. So you want to have a life insurance to be able to fund the special needs trust, because as long as you pay the premiums, it's reliable. And long-term care, because again, if Christian depends on me, which I don't know until when, later on I'm 80, 90, and I need care for myself. I need long-term care. Assisting living facilities and nursing homes are becoming very expensive. So you want to have a coverage that can be able to accumulate enough to be able to pay out along that time when you need it. And I've seen it right now. My grandfather passed away a couple weeks ago, and I know my mom was able to take care of him. But I would just imagine if a long term care facility, how much would it cost. So those are the three main areas that I focus on. Don't do any type of Bitcoin or nothing of that, no investments. My main thing is just insurance because I believe in it. It's a foundation. Hopefully it answered your question.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what a special needs trust is for some folks who may not know what that is or why they might want to think about that?
Yeah, that's more of the attorney side because I work with the attorney to use the life insurance to be able to fund it. But basically, a special needs trust is very important. And this is not legal advice, so I would just suggest that anybody who's listening should consult with an attorney. But basically, what it does is it shields the adult or child to not be, for example, if they inherit something, does not like jeopardize any government benefits the child or adult has. So it goes into the trust, and obviously there's many ways of structuring it, but it doesn't consider that inheritance, let's say life insurance, as ordinary income, for example. So it protects it. It's like a shield, so the benefits don't get interrupted, but at the same time, the funds are there for something very specific that the parents might be able to allocate or instruct.
I think that's
Amazing.
yeah, sorry, Dana. I think that's such an important piece of information because actually so many parents that I've had conversations with during transition planning, and I'm sure maybe Dana, you were going to jump in with something similar, don't even realize that the benefits that their children are going to start receiving, that if then their child then starts working and earning money, that then starts this like balancing act of how much money you can earn
Mm.
before it starts impacting.
Yeah, and not even that. There's other examples. Like for example, I was talking to a parent, and they told me, "Oh, I already have life insurance. I already have this." I said, "Perfect. Now, that's good that you're proactive, but does it consider your guardian? Because if I pass away and my brother, for example, or any other family member needs to assume responsibility for that child, may need to leave work, become a caregiver, they should have some sort of income." So if that life insurance is not considering the indirect cost that you're not seeing now, that's the type of conversation you should be having, right? Not only just the child, it's also just in a holistic view. And what happens to us as parents is that we focus too much on the child and we forget about not only ourselves, but all those scenarios that could happen that they're not thinking about. So that's the type of conversation we do.
Incredible. And Michelle, you're absolutely right. I was going to talk about the exact same thing. Michelle and I have worked. We're in obviously a different place than you, Michael. We're in Massachusetts, and we've worked with a lot of transition aged students and young people, and figuring out the balancing act with how much money they can make while employed, while also balancing any of the money that they're getting from the state. And it can be challenging. It can be so confusing for the students, for their families, for the parents. It can be, as you know, very confusing. So with that, I want to kind of transition to talking about, there are going to be, guaranteed, parents and caregivers who listen to us who are going to say, I think I could probably use this help, right? I think this is like help, whether it's from you, Michael, in your organization, or from somewhere else. Like, this is something I could use. And this is something I need to be thinking about, but probably like anybody else, want to get their sort of feet wet first, want to dip their toes. You mentioned your blog, you mentioned your website. I know, because we've looked around, obviously, we know you have a lot of resources. So do you want to just talk a little bit about sort of what those like entry level resources are that you sort of provide parents and families, caregivers, especially if they're kind of on the sort of initial fence about like, is this something I really need to be doing or considering, or, jumping right in now, or is it something I need to learn a little bit more about?
So first of all, I would suggest any parent listening, everything starts with a conversation. And just by going to an attorney, some attorneys say, hey, the first consultation is free. I don't know. Look for that type of conversation because you know what you know. And one of the top mistakes I see is that there are a lot of people speculating on, oh, the government's going to take care of me, or my employer is enough. My employer benefits are enough. And sometimes I've said it in other interviews that there's a lot of parents that want to do it themselves, have this want to do it themselves mentality. And what they don't know is that it's like going on cruise control, but you're going the wrong way. And that's what parents need to understand, that if you want to get results and want to create that safe strategy for your child or for yourself, you need to have these type of conversations. Not necessarily commit or not necessarily do everything at once, but the conversation needs to happen now, not 10 years from now that everything gets more expensive. Not, it's complicated, and these type of conversations take time. So that's my first suggestion. But in regards to the website, we have different type of resources. One of them is a letter of intent. The letter of intent is not a legal document, but it is a very useful document as it outlines routines, allergies, medications, contact information. Like, for example, not necessarily Ellie, my wife, or I pass away, but if we're in a car crash for 5 days and somebody needs to babysit Christian, he's allergic to peanuts. He cannot hear the blow dryer in public bathrooms. He cannot hear the blender. He's progressing, but that's normal, for we know it, but not necessarily the babysitter. So that type of document, you would provide that to anybody you believe could be a babysitter at one point. You would provide this type of document for them to be able to have it, as it's an emergency document, more or less. I also have an ebook for parents, like, for example, ourselves. We have Christian, who was diagnosed in 2022, but we also have Amanda. She's not diagnosed, she's neurotypical. We as parents need to create that balance so she doesn't feel left out. So that ebook is there to be able to nurture siblings. Because I've seen in some cases when I talk to families that that sister or brother doesn't want to be a guardian because they're so traumatized of the upbringing. Because there's a lot of mixed feelings, from being jealous at the same time being happy, resentful. There's a lot of things that happen. So that ebook can just shine some light to a couple parents. And I just created a checklist for parents. That's the link I'm going to provide you guys. So whoever subscribes, they're going to receive a checklist. And this checklist just helps parents if they don't want to talk to anybody. But at least if they get the checklist, it's going to make them think, because it's going to be a readiness checklist for them to understand what they have versus what they don't. So at least that gives them a head start in saying, okay, I don't have 6 months of saving. I don't have a life insurance policy. I don't have a trust. I don't understand my employer benefits. All that they're going to receive in the checklist. So that's part of the resources that we do have.
Super valuable. Very, very valuable resources. What is one thing, so in that first, and it's probably something you've already created, but in that first couple of days, that first couple of weeks, when you and your wife are, looking at Christian and thinking like, he's going to need some support from us, he's going to need some additional support outside of us, what are some of the things, or what is one thing maybe that you wish you had back then? As a parent, strictly as a parent or a caregiver, something that you wish you had?
Not had. I think I would wish I wasn't so selfish and thinking about only myself and how I felt. And I think that comes with denial, because the amount, the how much denial you have reflects on how selfish you are. And I think that's something that happened to us, that we were too caught up on the way we felt, not Christian, because in reality, there were symptoms. It doesn't mean that he was with that symptom 24 hours. It was more on our side. So something that I wish I would have not been like in my mindset was being so selfish around, hey, how I feel, how this is going to affect me, how I need to now adjust my lifestyle with my wife. I would have liked to be a little bit more open and not be so hard on ourselves.
I bet many parents could take that advice and not be so hard on themselves. With that, you've been really open, and thank you for that, about talking about your own family and your own life and about Christian. I'd love for you to tell us a couple of things, maybe one thing. What's your favorite thing about Christian? What are a couple of your favorite things about him? He seems like a cool little guy.
He is. I would say, he's a fighter, as well as his sister, because something that happens for us, Amanda, we believe, I'm not saying that this is a diagnosis, but we believe that her speech delay, because she does have, is because she hasn't been able to practice it. Because Christian just started talking I would say, a year and a half ago. So I would say both. Both of them are, even though they're having their own challenges and everything, they don't see it like that. Every time we try to incorporate something new, they're so open for it. Like, for example, something that we did with Christian a while ago was he has too much energy. At the same time, I don't, my wife doesn't. What can we do to help him and not put him in front of the TV or tablets? So we took him to soccer. He has elopement. It wasn't the best combination. Then we put him into swimming classes, but at the same time, he saw it as a play date, like going on the beach. He didn't really follow instructions. Now, where we saw progress was jujitsu. And the same thing, we're proud of it because he's always open to play, always open to see. And that's where we've seen results because he imitates other children, he follows instructions, he's very open to just be there. He doesn't elope. So, that type of progress itself for us, we celebrate it. So there's a lot of things that I would say it amazes us a lot.
I love that. I love that. And it must be so rewarding to see and experience and be there for all of the milestones and overcome challenges. And as both your children grow, right? And all children experience challenges, like you said, and ways to navigate that. And it sounds like your family is really just such a great team together.
Yeah, yeah. I would say now because it took us some time. And that's something I think I would love to relate to the audience that if you have any anxiety, if you have any uncertainty, you're in the right place. Because those symptoms, not symptoms, that thoughts are normal for parents with special needs. We're always going to be in survival mode. We're always going to be from that we're transitioning to autopilot mode. And that's normal. And we just need to take it instead of a victim mentality, just take it as an opportunity and see what things are you doing to be able to progress not only the your child but yourself. And some quote that I try to apply, which is difficult for us, but we do try, is a quote from Ginny Rometty. I think she's the former CEO of IBM. She would say that growth and comfort cannot coexist. And for us, we try to, there's a lot of things we try on other quotes, but that one is very powerful for us.
It is a very powerful quote and it resonates in so many different areas, right? Yeah. Um, if there was the biggest action step, like the one thing, if folks listening today, if they could do this one thing to get them kind of started, this is what we do with a lot of our clients is, okay, let's take all this overwhelm maybe you're feeling and having right now, and what's this one actionable step you can take today that will be this like really big rock mover for you? What would you recommend in terms of financial planning or any part of caregiving that you would recommend for folks?
To gain clarity, I would say to sit down and be able to write everything down. If it's from a financial, I also have a budget sheet. I can send it to you guys so you can share it.
Great.
That budget sheet, basically, you got to sit down with your spouse and just see what comes in, what comes out to really understand where you are. Because you can have a phone call with me, but if you don't know where you are, you don't know what's coming out, it might as well that call is not going to be of value, right? So the same thing for the child. You want to make sure that you're clear. Okay, what's happening? Where are the triggers? What's not? Where are those behaviors that you see that he might need help? Or is it something that it's a tantrum or a meltdown, right? I think clarity for us as professionals and as parents, it's gaining clarity. Clarity doesn't mean that you need to have the right answers. It's just knowing where are you. And based on that, you can make decisions.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really great piece of advice for everything, right? You don't know what you don't know. And it can be really scary, especially when thinking about finances and money. To like, I think a lot of us, myself included, tend to avoid looking at things because you're like you kind of know what you might see, and that it's like, okay, now what do I do? So if I just don't, ignorance is bliss if I don't know. But in fact, especially when you have children, your finances, that clarity is just so important.
Yeah, because for example, you don't know if a lot of problems might be that you need to reduce expenses, but what if not? Maybe you need to increase that income, or you want to, as parents with special needs, you do acquire a lot of skills. You're persistent, you're gaining consistency, you're understanding how to deal with complex issues, having hard questions, being able, all those traits can be applied in business or whatever, right? So as just by being a parent of a special needs child, you gain a lot. And I would suggest to, at the end of the day, think about that. Think about those before 5 years, I don't know how many years before the child to today, how much you've grown. And there's a lot of skills that you acquire, and that same skills are the type of skills you need to have when having this type of conversation, that you confront yourself with your finances, you confront yourself when you're having a child, because I think that that's the best way to be able to gain and making informed decisions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that this has given folks listening so much to kind of chew on and ponder. And so, for those of you listening today, if anything has come up to the surface for you or resonated, which we really hope that it has, we would love to hear from you with any questions that you might have. But I think it would be especially great, Michael, if you would let everybody know where they can reach out to you if they have questions or anything like that.
Of course. So www.theautismvoyage.com. There they're going to see the blogs that cater from music therapy to martial arts for special needs, haircuts, sensory overloads, to be able to find the resources which we talked about. There's more resources coming out during the year, and also the newsletter that you can subscribe. We send out 2 emails every week with different type of topics, but just to empower families like mine.
Amazing. Dana Marie, anything, last thoughts or?
No, I just want to say thank you again. We were lucky enough. We got to have another conversation with Michael prior to having him on the podcast. And I know for me, this is something as an in-school educator, but even as an advocate, that this is something that we don't sort of dip our toes into a lot. So this is sort of new ground for us too, thinking about the financial planning piece of just working with students and children with disabilities. So Michael, thank you so much for your expertise, for sharing your story, but also sharing about your own family and your own children. We really appreciate that. And just thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And
Thank you.
like Michelle said, we'll drop any questions that you have for us, and we'll drop some of the links that we talked about today in the show notes. We'll drop where to find Michael on social media, on the website, blog, etc. And if it feels right, if the time feels right, reach out to him. Send him a little note, at least go and check out the blog, at least go and check out the website, register for the newsletter rather. That's a great place to get started if you're just trying to get a little bit of information. But we'll give you all of that, like I said, in the show notes. And with that, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us on the podcast. And we will be back so soon, and we will talk to you then. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Michael, for being on today. Appreciate your time and sharing your expertise and story.
Thank you. Thank you so much.